Welcome to The Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. On today's episode of the Currency of Grief podcast, I am thrilled to be joined in the virtual studio with Christopher Dale, someone whose story deeply embodies what the currency of grief is all about. Chris is a certified financial planner and a certified financial transitionist. He's the founder of a Life After Grief Planning and someone who has lived the kind of losses that completely reshape a life. Chris shares how he navigated the death of both of his parents, the heartbreak of losing a child, and the heavy responsibility of caregiving without a roadmap. He also shares the lessons learned and how he turned those experiences into a calling to help others navigate the emotional and financial complexities of life after loss. Chris and I met through a mutual friend in the industry, and we obviously hit it off, as I feel like we're both on the same mission. I'm very excited to bring you this honest and insightful conversation with Chris Dale. Chris, thank you for being here.
Appreciate it, Justin. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. I'm so glad you decided to come on the Currency of Grief podcast. We talked about it pretty right before it was actually launched. And so I'm excited we brought this into reality and got you on the podcast. So, Chris, what made you want to come on the Currency of Grief and share your story?
Well, I think it was you. You inspired me in regards to the work that you are doing. And I take inspiration. My journey has been somewhat similar to yours, although there are a lot of differences. But I like interjecting myself with other people that are like-minded.
Exactly. I felt like from our first conversation, we were on the same mission, trying to do similar work. And I'm honored that you wanted to work together, especially in this capacity.
Pleasure is all my friend.
So here in the Currency of Grief, as you know from listening to a couple of the episodes, we don't really hold back and we dive right in. And so tell us a little bit about your grief story, maybe a timeline, and share with our audience.
Okay, as Justin was doing such a great job preparing me before I got on the podcast, I was really thinking about this aspect in this question. My grief officially started, if I can put a line in the sand, was in 2008. My mother went into a nursing home and she had metastatic breast cancer. And she was in a nursing home at my expense for 3 months at about $5,000 a clip. My parents were a classic example of folks that ran out of money to facilitate their life when they had dire medical expenses. And they didn't have a plan. I was their plan. Much that you described when you were talking about yourself in the episode that was about you. I had to do everything for them. I had what I would call a non-participating brother at the time. We are great friends now. And so my mom died in 2008, August. And my father passed away in November of 2008. So 2.5 months removed.
Wow.
And again, I was their primary caregiver and overseeing everything. And I did everything. I wanted to do things for them such that I had no guilt or no remorse when they passed away. My grief is very, very complicated. And it's not just a situation to where I've had people pass away and I've had to pick up the cards. And I'm going to explain why that is. So the day that my father passed away, I found out that he had a 40-year affair with another woman.
Oh my gosh.
I also found out that there was a child. Through lots of research and digging, she's not a biological child. She's not my sister. That was a shock. And if you talk about me hitting a low, and I hit a rock bottom after my dad passed away. And the rock bottom, I'm not a drug addict, never been a drug addict, but it felt like I hit rock bottom as if I was a drug addict. I had no resources to figure stuff out. I had to figure it out all on my own. The only resource that I had to help me through this process were the good friends and family around me and my personal priest. I'm a very spiritual person. And like you had talked about on a previous podcast of yours, I went to what I would call experts, and they failed me. I went to an estate planning attorney or two. They failed me. And this was before my parents passed away, because I was trying to position my mother to be able to take advantage of benefits, government benefits. And every step along the way, I was failed, given bad information. And so that experience humbled me with the passing and the loss of my parents. And then you talk about the aspect of finding out about this 40-year affair. And this is going to multiply. I'm going to dive into that aspect too. So then about a year and a half later, my paternal grandmother passed away. She was the matriarch of our family, basically. And then out of those 3 deaths, those weren't the hardest. The hardest was when my wife and I were expecting twins. My oldest son, who is living, his brother didn't survive. That was by far the hardest to stomach. And so, my wife and I had, after Christopher was his name, after he didn't survive, it was touch and go with my son Elias, who is alive and well. And I had to put my grief on hold through a lot of those processes. And so I had to kind of go through and manage life. And during that interim between the loss of my grandmother and Christopher, there were things that I did, but it was enough to get me to the next stage. But it wasn't all encompassing to fully heal me. I went on a medical missionary trip. I went to some group grief counseling. But again, when we lost Christopher, that was a really low. But we had to worry about my eldest son, who was thriving, and how to get him to full term.
Yeah.
So then I go a few more years in life after grief. That's the name of my firm. Go a few more years, and I realize my life has more purpose than working for a firm who doesn't care about me and just cares about the bottom line. And so I made a career shift. And my career shift was that I wanted to serve, as you do, people that were like me 17 years ago. And I have all this experience that I can give, and I can help people not go through the complete rock bottom that I went through. That is my purpose. And so I started my firm, and I really liked what I was doing. But as life kind of carries on, you start figuring out other stuff about yourself. So I'm going to revisit that aspect. And I kind of glossed over it about my father having a 40-year affair. So, excuse me, that was significant in my life, and it closed some of the loops that I had in my mind about holes in my memory. I found out in my late 40s that I was abused as a child. And I say I found out because I repressed it. And I was abused along with my brother because my mother was trying to deal with what my dad was doing to her.
Hmm.
And that was her way out. And back in those days, going to a counselor, wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So I had to deal with that. And then raising two young boys, all I've learned is you kind of hit first.
Hmm.
But I was cognizant of that, and I didn't want to revisit that and do that in my life.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of counseling and to get through some of those hurdles and really transform my life into what it is today. And I love where I'm at and helping out folks through the emotional aspect of money, because I was there since a young child. We
Yeah.
had no money because my dad was supporting another family,
Hmm.
and unbeknownst to me. So a lot of the stuff that I do is by innate instinct and then formal education.
Hmm.
And that's, I'm an open book, and that's kind of where I'm at this point.
Wow. Um, so yeah, and take a deep breath after that. I appreciate your open book, your openness, transparency, and going into your loss, your grief, and whether it was through death or through abuse. Wow. Um, so you mentioned we had no money because your dad was supporting another family, and you were abused as a child. Um, I guess positives and negatives. Like, what was your childhood like? How would you describe it, and how would you describe your parents?
The first thing that I would say, I would never change anything that's happened in my life.
Mm,
And when I say that, folks say, well, things were pretty bad. And I say, but it's made me the man that I am today.
yeah.
And I understand that, excuse me, that I've been given a gift. Um, and by me describing it may not sound like a gift, but it is a gift. My childhood, as a young child, I sheltered is probably the best thing that comes to mind. There were a lot of things that were hidden from me. And my brother and I are 9 years apart. He's 9 years older than me, um, similar to you and your brother. Is that right?
Yeah, that
Okay.
is correct.
Yep. So he was old enough to know what was going on, and I was not. And so he was an only child until 9. And then I came along, and up until 8, we were in Kansas City, Missouri, where all of this was going on. And at 8 years old, we moved to Florida, meaning myself, my mom, and my dad. My brother was going off to college. And all I knew was, we had a lot of family, and there were several points where, my dad was he was gone, like all the time. And I didn't question it. And the story that I was told was that, he was going to work or he was going to do this, but my father was rarely around, when I was a child. And I just thought it was normal. And so when you grow up like that and things good, bad, or indifferent become normal, that is your norm. And so I didn't know any different. I didn't know that a father should be around all the time. And I didn't know that every child, doesn't wake up and their mom hits them, or their mom slaps them in the face. I didn't know any different. And the other thing too that I found out during that time frame was allegiance to family. This is a good thing that came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
I knew as a child that these things weren't necessarily right, and I was trying to decipher that. And so I saw glimmers of great family dynamics. And the matriarch of my family that I talked about, my paternal grandmother, her and my grandfather, um, they were always hanging out together. They had friends over all the time. They were doing their extent of kind of traveling together, and they just did things together all the time. And I spent a lot of time with them, and I saw that.
Hmm.
And it was such a disconnection from what I saw with my mom and dad, that was kind of what I aspired to be like,
Yeah.
and have this strong, strong family bond. And so then, as we moved to Florida, um, I'm going to back up. When we were in Kansas City, my brother and I had shelter because we had family members, mainly my mom's sisters, that would come and rescue us. And I had these memories of doing stuff that was fun, but it wasn't with my parents. I couldn't figure that out. I went back to each one of my mother's sisters after I had this awakening. That's the best way to describe it. And I asked them very tough questions, and it was almost like I couldn't believe what transpired. And so I
Yeah.
asked them, and they completely validated what went on. And I was utterly shocked. And they said, well, we were meant to keep this from you.
Yeah.
And they felt so much guilt. But they rattled off lots of stuff. And but again, my allegiance to my family was a extreme positive. The other positive is I saw very strong things to do with money and how to make money work for you with very little money. And I had an appreciation of very small things. As a kid, if the power gets cut off, the water gets cut off, the phone gets cut off, you don't take those things for granted as you become an adult because you know that it could happen at any point.
Yeah.
So those are some of the positives, and I carry those experiences on. The negatives were sheltering all this stuff that happened to me for 40 some years
Wow.
and not being able to decipher it and understand it. And my brother says this the best, and I'll quote my brother. He said, it really must suck that you woke up one day and realized that your life was a lie. So I had to decipher that through a lot of therapy. And the specific therapy that I went through is EMDR. And it's a pretty aggressive type of therapy for your listeners who are unaware. And it is basically for PTSD survivors. So I went through 18 months of that every week. Very, very aggressive. But again, I'm someone that I'm not going to be mediocre. I'm not going to keel over and die. I'm going to strive for greatness.
Yeah.
And that's what I knew that I had to do.
Yeah. One of when we talked about what was surprising or unique about your grief experience, you said that you made it through to the other side of grief. So talk about the emotional toll. Like, what is it like from an emotional standpoint? What made you feel alone, and why was that so hard?
What made me, and I'm going to go back to vividly, when I was in the group counseling, I felt so alone because there was no one at my age in my early 30s that had the same experience that I had. I found nobody, and I searched. I felt very alone and isolated. In my group counseling, the folks that were there were 20, 30, 40 years older than me. And they normalized my experience. However, I still felt alone because there was nobody that was my age. And they all told me that you're young for this to be happening to you. But you're here for another purpose. And so the emotional toll that took on me, and now that I am very aware of my emotions and my triggers, my mind has been spinning. And that's the best way that I can describe it. A lot of confusion, brain fog. Since I was probably, the earliest memory I have of this is probably 6th or 7th grade. I remember sitting in a classroom and I'm preparing for a test, and it just sounds like an alarm has gone off and you just can't concentrate, and everything is just so chaotic. And it was just my mind. It was on fire.
Yeah.
And it was on fire because I was dealing with all this other stuff at home that nobody else was dealing with. And so it was disturbing to me, and I had extreme anxiety since probably 6th or 7th grade, and not understanding how to deal with that, and just thinking that it's normal, and not knowing where this sense of anxiety comes from. But it came from my chaotic background. And at that point too, we both went to UF.
Go
and Go Gators. And my only way out of that situation, and I knew this from an early age, And the only thing that I could control was my education. And so I went to UF on a full academic scholarship. I controlled that. I wasn't going to be worried about if my parents could afford school or not. They did do the Florida prepaid. Um, I just didn't believe it because of things that I saw.
Mm,
And my parents did the best that they could, given the bad decisions that my dad made.
hmm.
And so I forgave my parents. I want to be very clear about that for the things that happened. And I loved my parents. I loved my parents eternally. And if they were here now, um, we wouldn't miss a beat. You know, we would still be hanging out. It was just this ugly past that, that happened.
Yeah. What do you love about your parents?
I love my parents. My dad taught me a lot of stuff about business. And so I have an extreme business sense that is uncanny. I was exposed to a lot of things because my father was an entrepreneur. My dad made a lot of mistakes too, and I learned a lot from that. Um, I love my mother because I got some of the family dynamics from her, and I got the strong spiritual sense from my mother. We always went to church. Every Sunday we went to church, and I really love that about her. My mother was very headstrong, and so I can appreciate that in a woman being, headstrong. And honestly, my mother's demeanor helped me prepare for a lot of the folks that I work with now. A majority of my clients are A-type personality females. So it's very easy for me to work in that dynamic.
Okay.
And there are a myriad of other things that, I really appreciated and loved about my parents. Like I said, I wouldn't change my childhood. I wouldn't change one thing that happened.
Amazing. Well, amazing. And that's tough. But so on the, as we're navigating this, as you're navigating this, um, you, you have worked on yourself and made it to the other side. So for those going through it, let's say they're in the, we call it sitting in the mud. They're sitting in the mud. They're in the pit of grief, the deep
Sure.
dark pit. Um, what is it like to take hold of your grief and do the work to heal and come out the other side?
It's hard. And I can honestly say it's not for everybody. You have to make a decision. And I liken it to this. And I had this conversation actually with my counselor recently. When you hit rock bottom, you got to figure stuff out. You can't rely on anybody else. And sometimes you can have a crutch. When you hit rock bottom, you have no golden parachute. You have nothing, and you have to figure it out. And some folks, and I'm going to make this very drastic, some folks will keel over and die, literally. Some folks will just be mediocre. And for me, being mediocre for myself would have meant I would have went on medication that would have just masked what I was going through. And then the hard decision, but the hard decision is short lived. And the hard decision for me is going through this extensive therapy, having to relive all of these traumatic experiences. And so, my experience is 40 some years, but I only took 18 months to revisit those hard ones. And so I looked at it like that, and it leaped me light years ahead. And I'm going to get a little deep here. So with regard to trauma and things that folks mask, your body keeps the score. And there's a book on this. And your body is remembering it, even though I block these things out. My body is remembering these things, and my body
Yeah.
is telling me there's something wrong. And unless I address these things, that I'm not going to physically get better.
Hmm.
And I reached a point where my body just blew up because I had so much stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And once I unpacked that stuff and I released it, and again, I had extreme anxiety. I was mad at people. I was angry. I probably was a little depressed at certain points. I was lethargic. I was tired. Um, but I knew that the other side was going to be much better. And you
Mm.
can hear it in my voice. I have
Yeah.
energy behind me. And so I just knew that I had to get to that other side. The other thing too is I had people that relied on me. And so if I didn't do the best version, I wasn't going to be in a position to help other people. And
Yeah.
that's from clients, my kids, my wife. And so that's what energizes me. And so like I said, to answer your question very directly, it's a lot of hard work.
Hmm.
It's a lot of hard work, but I'm a testament that it is worth the work. You're investing in yourself.
Yeah. Mm.
There's no better investment, outside of investing in your children than investing, in yourself.
Yeah. So it sounds like you revisited these deep, dark moments that caused you that trauma and PTSD through the 18-month training, or like I would say like therapy,
Correct.
EMDR. Um, it's, I'm going to use a really, really poor analogy here. All right. It's a sports analogy, but
Okay,
bear
I
with
can go
me.
with that.
Um, and like Tyrese Halliburton just like made a game winner last
Yep.
night. And so like when you're in those moments, um, you have to like visualize those moments in order for it to become sort of natural for you and part of your new normal. And so in sports, you do that. You're like bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. I gotta put the ball in play here, or 3 seconds left on the clock. I gotta take my shot. It's, I would say, or it sounds like from you, like it's similar with grief, not the exact same, but you have to revisit the dark moments in order to navigate through into the light.
That's 100% correct. So you know what the bad looks like. Until you take that leap of faith to take a risk, to have a chance to have good moments, you're not going to have any good moments. So that exactly, I wouldn't say that's a poor analogy, because Tyrese Halliburton has probably been through a lot of bad things in regards to his basketball career. And so to visualize something better than your current situation is the epitome of doing better
Yeah.
and something else to strive for. I didn't want to be someone where, I had anxiety all the time. That sucked.
Mm-hmm.
I had it all the time, didn't know where it came from. And now I visualized not having anxiety, and I rarely have anxiety now. And that's a beautiful thing.
It's awesome.
Not having these things racing, your heart racing, my mind spinning. Those were really, really nice things not to have any longer. And I did that.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit more about your support crew, because there were people relying on you, your clients, but also more importantly, your family, and investing in your kids and your spouse. And so, um, how do you take your grief and your past and the trauma and move forward with it with your family? And what lessons do you teach your kids around the emotional side?
I'm going to focus on my kids first. As
I knew you
men,
would.
yeah, as men, we're taught not to dive into our emotions. I was no different. However, I had a chance to change that dynamic. I teach my kids that it is fine to be emotional. I teach my boys it is fine to cry. I teach my boys it is fine to be sad. I also teach them that although they can't control these emotions that come to them, they can control their reaction to them and how they deal with them, and how they navigate bringing that emotion down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tool that I never had.
Wow.
And they're learning how to do this. My oldest son is 12. My youngest son is 10. That's powerful, because I had 40 some years of just reacting to fire, and they don't have to do that. So that is the emotional gift that I've been able to give them.
It's great.
This process for them, well, probably not them, but probably more so for my wife, has probably been, I mean, it's been difficult because the person that she married, we've been married 21 years ago. I had masked a lot of things, and I didn't do it on purpose. It was just how I was just getting through life. And so after I get through all of this therapy, there's a tremendous change in myself. And the change is, my dad did things with regard to my mother, out of guilt. And he taught me some of those same things. I'm not that person. I'm not the person that's had a 40-year affair and I'm having to do things out of guilt, to appease my wife and make her feel better for the moment. That's not me. And I'm having to roll back the curtain on some of those things that I may have learned from my father and kind of implemented in my marriage, because he taught me how to do those things. So those things are changes. And though they're changes in regards to boundaries that I have to put up to protect myself emotionally at this point. And so, yeah, like I said, no doubt this process and this change within me has been something that my wife has had to adjust to.
Yeah.
My kids probably not so much because they were growing up and they really have just seen this other version of myself.
Yeah. So Christopher and Elias are your oldest? Are your oldest?
Yeah. So Christopher was born in 2012. Didn't survive. Eli was born in 2013.
Okay.
And then Gideon is my youngest, and he was born in 2015.
Okay. Got it. So, describe a little bit about the courage to continue trying to have children while, after Christopher's not surviving birth.
Well, there was no courage on my part. I'm going to be honest about that. The courage was on my wife. And I was just, whenever she wanted, I wanted to have more kids, but after the first experience, I was like, man, this is a lot. I was like, are you sure you want to do this again? And she's like, absolutely. And she said, I don't want Eli to not have a sibling. And so I followed my wife blindly, and there were no complications with Gideon's pregnancy. And, 10 years later, my boys are best friends. And
Amazing.
I think my courage in that situation was because my wife had the courage to go through it again. So I followed her, and, we've made a great team for 21 years. Just like any couple, we have our ups and downs. I'm going to venture to say that we've probably been dealt some cards differently than most other people. I can probably stand on a limb and say that. But we're still here. We enjoy each other. And, we just have to learn. We're learning how to kind of live life differently based on a lot of the stuff that's happened.
Mm-hmm. I think we all are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like your analogy going back to the lessons that you've taught your kids is controlling your reaction to things.
Sure.
It's really good. We're going to pivot here. So financially, talking about money now with the currency of grief. So financially and logistically, during your mom and your dad's passing in 2008, what role did you take on before and after each of their loss?
So the role I took on before their loss was garnering their finances. Specifically in 2006, I think it was 2005, 2006, I had clear line of sight that my parents were going to run out of money. Based on my dad having to stop working because of my mom's health ailments. And I had to figure out how I was going to be in a position to fund them. And financially, again, at that point, I was in my, late 20s. And having to figure that out at the beginning of your career when you basically don't have very much money at all,
Yeah.
is daunting. It's very scary. So what I did, they had a house, and I was in a position, because of the good financial practices that I had, that I said to my folks, let me buy your house from you. And it was a strain. I'm not going to lie about that. So let me buy your house. And the clear line of sight that I saw was that the real estate market was dramatically going up. And I could be in a position to take advantage of the market continuously going up and pulling a line of credit. And then if it went up more, get a line of credit extending that. That was how I was able to fund their lifestyle until they passed away. That was pre them passing away. However, that strategy backfired, because in 2008, which was the real estate and the market crash, that house was now underwater. And I was doing it, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people were taking advantage and extending their lines of credit to buy other things. I was doing it for an ethical reason. I was trying to extend the well-being of my parents. And so in 2008, after they had passed away, their house was in it was in disarray and it needed repairs. And I had a decision to make. And this is also the line in the sand where I really could have used somebody like yourself or used somebody like myself. I needed somebody, even though I was a financial professional at the time, somebody to help walk me through, do I sell this house or do I rent it? And all this grief that's going on within me, I didn't want to have anything to do with that house. It was a house that I grew up in since the age of 16. And I came back after college and moved in for like 8 months so I could, save some money so my wife and I could buy a house. I just didn't want to have anything to do with the house. It just brought me bad memories. And so I didn't sell the house and I rented it. I had to put a lot of money into it to be able to rent it. And that was a financial decision that I had to make, putting my grief aside. And it was the right decision. And I like to tell stories. I'm going to tell you another short story, but it was the right decision based on the market at the time. The decision and how life kind of unfolds is I rented that house to a bunch of older college students whose parents were on the lease. One of the college students got in trouble with the law and had been having marijuana shipped. And this is before marijuana, well, it's not legal in Florida, but before it was even a thing to be legal in the US at all. And they caught up with him because he had been having it shipped through the United States Postal Service. And they did a raid on my parents' house.
Wow.
And they found $14,000 worth of marijuana. And you talk about you talk about surrounding yourself with good people. I'm pausing because it was ridiculous. And the house is in my neighborhood that I live in. And they did a raid on my parents' house. And this is probably 2010. My defense attorney, who is a personal friend of mine, said that Orange County was looking to seize houses because they were in a financial deficit. So you talk about the financial impact could have dramatically affected me if I didn't have the right people in place. And he intervened, and they didn't seize the house. They just put this individual in jail, and I had no liability in the situation at all. I had no idea what was going on. I've never even smoked marijuana. And nonetheless, I couldn't even tell you where to get it from. So the financial impact, that's real. That's a real life story of the financial impact beforehand and how it carried through after.
Yeah. So let's take a step back.
Sure.
You mentioned your good financial practices that you had. Give us maybe your top 3 good financial practices that you had that allowed you the wherewithal to step into action, buy your parents' home, decide whether to rent it or to sell it for your own, and put your grief aside and focus on the finances?
Mine are pretty basic. So always paying myself first, the financial practice and having a budget. And I say pay myself first because even though that house was upside down, I could still service the debt. I had an emergency fund that I could service the debt if I needed to, before finding renters. I also had a budget. And very specifically, I knew every dollar that I put into the house, and I knew every dollar that was allocated everywhere. And I had two budgets at the time. I had our household budget with myself and my wife, and then I had a separate budget for this house. But this separate budget for the house was easy because I had already been in practice doing the budget for our own. And so that allowed me to have a clear window. Okay, so say the house was going to cost me $2,000 a month, and say I had $30,000 in an emergency fund, then I know that, okay, well, I have about a year window here, a little bit over a year, where I can hold on to this house. Without having the budget and without having that emergency fund, I would have had no idea. And those were the good financial practices that I had, two of them. The budget was something that I took from my father. Another good thing that I got from my father.
Wow.
So I would say those are the top two.
Yeah. I think, well, it sounds like dealing with the home was difficult and you had to put your grief aside, and the history, the stories, the potential trauma of that home, and kind of like find some clarity within the fog and try to make real financial decisions. As you guide people now in your job, how do you help people make financial decisions while they're in that grief fog?
I allow them space. And the other thing too, whenever I'm working with someone that is in what I would call mind fog or grief fog, is I always ask them if they have worked with a professional or gone to any kind of grief counseling. And it's not my job to be a grief counselor. It's not my job to push it. Merely I ask the question, and I say that I ask the question because if you have not gone through that process or started that process, our financial journey is going to be slower because you're dealing with all this other stuff at the same time. If you're utilizing a professional that can help you compartmentalize this and deal with it head on, I know that our process is going to be faster. And so then I can work with them, and I can, through my certified financial transitionist training, I can now implement different tools based on where they are.
Yeah.
And I can identify that. And I can tell them what we're going to do and how long it's going to take based on where you are. It's completely customized.
So that's the space, is being able to time it out. I think people come to me or even post grief, they want to make some sort of decision and get a win under their belt. And I find a lot of decisions made within grief are not always the right ones. And so space is super important, and expectation setting is super important to say, hey, these are the decisions that we should be making now. And these are the decisions that can wait. And this is the expectation of like how we're going to make decisions that are, you feel in the moment, like really, really, really important.
Sure. One of the things that I do is 9 times out of 10, I'll back up. 9 times out of 10, when I have someone that comes to me that is in grief, they're coming to me because they have some assets that they have come into. And when they come to me, it's kind of a shock. They say, well, Chris, I got this life insurance policy for $100,000 and I want to do something with it. And then they come to me and it's almost like they hit this kind of figurative brick wall. And I say, I'm going to tell you a secret. We're probably not going to do anything with that $100,000 for 6 months, maybe even 12 months. There's so much other stuff that you have to figure out and have to get through before making a rational decision on that $100,000. And it's also about giving folks what I call, this is a very technical term, a decision free zone. And it's not an opportunity not to make a decision, but you can now rank your decisions on what's most important.
Yeah.
And that $100,000 isn't the most important thing. What's most important, if we're looking at financially, is do you have a budget? So now we can rank those things, and now we can put in the pieces of where you need financial help and where you need financial guidance. Because I, as a financial planner, as you well know this, if you say that you want to invest $100,000 and I have no idea about your debt situation, I don't know about your cash flow situation, and I just readily invest that money for you, I'm doing you a disservice. And in my position, I could become liable for that.
And you're throwing darts at a dartboard.
Yes, you are.
So about this decision free zone, as people are having experienced a lot, I mean, it sounds like you did this with your parents, and so you had to recreate your own budget with this new normal. And so let's say someone comes to you having lost a parent or a spouse, and they have come into a little bit of money, but they also have to make more decisions. Like how should someone go about creating a new budget given this new normal without having any prior knowledge of what it's all going to cost? What does it take?
Well, I think it takes some of the financial aspect out of it. And so I say that because if someone is coming to me, and I'm thinking of a very specific example of a client that I worked with, who lost her husband, and she came to me with a new normal, very readily. And so her new normal is she's trying to process this grief, and her new normal is she going to stay in this house because this house brings only not bad memories, but it brings sad memories. And so her new normal is, how do we kind of structure her to be in a different environment? And what does that look like? And so there's a kind of a scientific approach to take that. But underneath, I'm utilizing my training as a certified financial planner. I'm doing all of that stuff. But the other stuff is the emotional component. Now we're focusing on, okay, well, you're satisfying your basic needs. And when somebody comes to me, one of the first things that I do is I evaluate, and it's a very easy, it's not a long drawn out, it's just a kind of a quick snapshot of where you are now. That's palatable, that I know that somebody in grief fall can take that in. But the other aspect too is, how do we fantasize about like the future? You're in such a dark place right now, but how do we fantasize about the future where you want to be?
Yeah.
Well, that's me. That's where I come in.
That's the fun part of the job.
That is the fun part of the job, because they're now interacting with somebody that has been at the bottom of the ocean and is now in the heavens. And so I understand that. And that's where I bring the inspiration, but I have to back that up with some real stuff. I can't be, this hype guy. I got to back it up with some real stuff. And so when a client interacts with me, I support them. I heavily support them, but there's a lot of real stuff that I bring, and I'm just giving you bits and pieces here.
For sure.
There.
I want to bring this back to your parents. So you mentioned you realized that your parents were going to run out of money. You're in your mid to late 20s. Is that right?
Correct.
And so what was it like for you to make that realization and realize that you were going to have to support them and pay for your mom's nursing home at your own expense? What were the costs associated? How did you navigate that?
Well, from an emotional standpoint, I'll talk about that first. From an emotional standpoint, I'm going through something all over again that I never wanted to go through. I never wanted to be in a situation to where I ran out of money. And it happened again. And that it was out of my control. When we were kids, like I said, we had no money. And just things happen. And that happened again. That was daunting. It was heartbreaking, and it's very difficult when you don't have control.
Yeah.
And so that's the one aspect. Kind of getting back to your point of, what that looks like and kind of how you now kind of go forward and plan, for that. Like I said, when you hit rock bottom, you got to figure this stuff out. And I figured out the bottom was coming at some point. And putting a plan of action in, like I had mentioned, to fund them, not knowing what that is going to look like.
How long? How much?
How long? Yes. And I had no window of how long that's going to happen. And during the process, after my mom passed away, and I'll get into a second, the nursing home aspect, but I went to my father and said, I can no longer afford the house with you in it. I'm going to have to find someplace else for you to live. And then he passed away like a month or so later.
Wow.
The aspect of my parents running out of money was probably a year before they passed away. So they were completely on my payroll for at least 12 months. And so these things I've come to grips with. Financially, I said to myself, my mom is suffering. I want her to pass away. And everybody is suffering along with her. And I was struggling with that because she's my mom. She's suffering. Everybody else is suffering. She's not the same version of herself. And how do I come to grips with that? Those are natural feelings. I know that. And they're acceptable to have those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And them running out of money took me to that point. And so I had no runway. Again, I prepared for this, but I've prepared as much as I possibly can. And so when my mother went into the nursing home, and again, I won't get into the dynamics of Medicare and Medicaid and how that kicks in, but she got rejected from government subsidy 3 separate times. And I figured out that she had to go to the hospital and stay there for a sustained period of time before the government would kick in. Nobody could tell me that.
Yeah.
You're going to ask a question.
I was going to ask a question. Yeah, actually, for our audience who may not know, and it's okay if you don't have all of the answers, but describe Medicaid and Medicare and like when one kicks in and when the other is needed for support.
Sure. I'm going to mix up the two. I commonly get them mixed up because they're so close. But basically, one is insurance, health insurance.
Yeah.
And then the other one kind of kicks in for other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother had to be in the hospital. And I'm not going to get this 100% correct, but she had to be in the hospital for a certain period of time before it would kick in at 100% for a period of time.
Yeah.
And my mother was in the hospital at 2 or 3 different stents. And there was no manipulation on my part. I just had the knowledge that she needed to be at the facility,
right,
in the hospital for this Medicaid, Medicare to kick in.
Yeah.
And so the last time that she was there, that was kind of the line in the sand to where she would get some things paid for, but then we had to pick the facility. And the facility was not going to be covered on 100%. There was going to be some subsidy. And we wanted a facility where it was close to our house, where we reasonably thought it was good. And
but it wasn't going to break the bank.
Yeah, it wasn't going to break the bank. So that facility, my father ended up picking it out, and it was $5,000 at my expense, May, June, July, August of 2008. So you're talking
the worst
about
time, like mid financial crisis.
Yeah, so I'm still pulling money out of this line of credit, which is about to dry up, and I'm pulling out almost $20,000 to have her in a nursing home. So
So yeah, just to circle back, Medicare is federal health insurance,
That's
and
right.
for people 65 and older or with disabilities, and Medicaid um, is the federal, and there's federal and state programs, but it's covers medical costs for people with limited resources and limited
That's
income.
correct. And commonly when you're going to use that, you have to draw down your assets.
Right. Or do some sort of planning around them.
Yep. Or you can put them in a trust or something of that nature, which I found out at that point. So another tip too that I will extend is that when folks, and I would call you and I in kind of this sandwich generation where we're in a situation where we would have to help our folks or be in a position to help our folks. A facility such as a nursing home, they want someone to be financially obligated, specifically beyond the death of that person. They will ask you to sign on as financially responsible.
Hmm.
You're in brain fog and you're trying to figure all this stuff out, and it's very easy to sign that piece of paper. And so what happens after the fact, they come after you and say, well, you owe this money for X number of things that happen in the facility and ongoing. And that's a very clear piece of education that I give people based on my experience. I had the peace of mind not to sign on as financially obligated to, fund
Cover
or
their
do
costs.
whatever, to cover it. But not everybody's going to have that peace of mind because they're in brain fog.
Yeah. So wow. Um, was there, if you were to look back, is there anything financially or logistically that you would have done differently or wish you had a resource for?
Um, I wish I had a resource, an estate planning resource that could walk me through all of this stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I wish I would have had a financial um, buddy that could have walked me through this.
Yeah.
Those are probably the two pieces that I wish that I had.
And you mentioned your dad had a lot of business savviness. Um, but how was money talked about in your home growing up? Was it open across the table? People, your family shared dollars and cents and where everything was, or was it close to the chest or somewhere in between?
We our money situation was drastic, and my father commonly said this: don't do as I do, do as I say. So he would give me good financial advice, but on the back end wouldn't necessarily practice it. And so money was talked about in what you should do. And these are the tools that, you should do them in. And seeing a lot of this other stuff that happened, and I laugh because I've seen so much.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, I know the right thing to do. And that's what I'm going to practice, are the right things. So in my family, there were a lot of smoke and mirrors when it came to money. My father, although he had these businesses, we were portrayed as being an upper middle class family. But the reality, like I said, because he was supporting two families, was other than that. So having and being an entrepreneur like he was, there were times that he had, some cash, and then there were times he had nothing, no money.
Yeah.
And those are the experiences that we didn't necessarily talk about, but it was an experience that you felt and you saw, and that dictated any kind of money habits.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like your money identity was shaped from what your dad taught and also what he did to do something different and
Correct.
provide your kids, your family, your clients with a different type of life.
That's correct. And as you're saying that, there's something else that came up to mind too. Money habits. I am always an advocate of doing something in addition to what you're gaining money for. And I say this to my kids, having a side hustle.
Hmm.
And not having a side hustle isn't a bad thing. It's just having another stream of income. And um, I've learned that from a very, very early age. Having
Yeah.
a side hustle because, you know, things could just fall out. And then there becomes an element of risk that comes with a side hustle. And so, if this is a financial podcast, and I'll liken it to investment risk. And so, you have a portfolio where any client is investing, and you're having to evaluate their risk and their risk tolerance and what they're able to stomach. And in order to get whatever the return is, their goal is. And
Okay.
I've always done that, but not know that I was doing it. In the terms of having a side hustle, because this is another piece of income. Again, those two experiences I had with my parents and as a
Yeah.
kid, I need something else, just in case something falls out.
It sounds like you're diversifying your income risk. So if
That is exactly right.
one job went away, you still had something else that could at least weather the storm for a little bit before you were back into surplus.
That's correct. That's the epitome of having an emergency fund.
Yeah.
So that's how I
Yeah.
looked at having an emergency fund, is that way.
Yeah. Um, so how do you incorporate your experience, and how has it changed the way you approach life, money, planning, and legacy?
I will start at the legacy aspect first, because that's ultimately going to back me into all the other stuff in regards to money. Legacy is, I want to be the most honest and authentic person possible. And I want people to understand that, not because I'm telling them that, but because they listen to me and understand, what I've done and the example that I give off. That is the ultimate legacy. I could care less about money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's funny to kind of say that from a financial planner. My life experience has told me that money is a means to an end. And it's a means to an end because money can get me now. If I have to go into a nursing home, that can fund my nursing home and my kids don't have to pay for that. That's a
Yeah.
means to an end, a very specific example.
Yep. Yeah.
And in regards to what what my experience does for other clients and people that I work with, well, my experience allows me to be very empathetic. My experience allows me to have very specific processes to help people navigate finances while they're in the throes of grief.
Mm,
Those are very, very difficult to line up, but I understand that emotions dictate money decisions.
for sure.
Um, tech, technical stuff doesn't dictate, uh, decision making. And then sometimes they collide, and I have to be the one to talk to my client and say, well, um, this is what you should do, but I'm giving them permission, so to speak, to take this other avenue.
Right.
And then we garner decision making around that. So that's really what I
Yeah.
bring to the table when I'm working with folks.
For example, keep or sell a house that
That's
your
exactly
parents lived
right.
in or
Yep,
somebody lived in.
that's exactly right.
How do you incorporate your sons into this life, money, and legacy life that you live?
Well, this is fun. So for the first several years of my boys' life, they had no idea that I had a job. and and that was a true testament to me, because I worked before they got up, while they were at school, and then late at night. But what I quickly figured out, because of what I was doing and I was getting recognized, and other people would say stuff to me, and my boys um, would say, "Daddy, you're not telling us about this stuff." And again, I just did things to further myself along with, just because that's how I learned how to go about life. And so COVID shifted a lot of that stuff, and it shifted things for me in particular. I mean, I was already working at home and doing Zoom calls all the time. But what I had to do now is I had to figure out how to incorporate my boys into my practice. And I did that to some extent. You know, my clients would meet my kids. My wife would meet my kid, or excuse me, my wife would meet my clients. We'd go out to dinner. But COVID, man, they went everywhere with me. Because my wife's a nurse. She was at the hospital working. And so my boys were on Zoom calls with me. They went to clients' houses with me for client meetings. So my boys got a firsthand account of what I was doing. And it was really cool. And so what that's now transitioned to is that my boys, even at their young ages, they work for me. They are paid employees. And so that's cool because now I can teach them these good money habits, which they have. Pay yourself first. They have their own kind of little budget with their money and their cash, and they count their cash.
That's awesome.
It is. And we talk about money very openly, which was not the case, when I was a kid. And so I can translate all of these experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, to positive experiences to my kids.
That's great.
And that's what it's all about for me.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm just visualizing your kids. I'm surprised they're not here right now, but visualizing your kids on the Zoom call or going to your clients' houses as you're talking about spreadsheets and stuff like that on the dinner table. They're like climbing on the couch or something like that.
Yeah.
But really, it sounds like the biggest takeaway is that you're helping them create a future, a visualization of what healthy money habits are and how people can openly talk about money at their young age, which is super, I mean, they're blessed for that experience.
Yeah, they are. And thank you for pointing that out. And I think the biggest thing is I take the emotion out of money with regard to them. Because again, everybody knows money can be very, very emotional.
Yeah.
Mine was extreme. But they have a blank slate and they can say, well, I can work for daddy and I can make X number of dollars for, per hour. And that's all I got to worry about.
Yeah.
That's nice. And I like that aspect, whether, versus worrying about if your power is going to get cut off. That's extreme.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
I guess going from the extreme, how has your experience changed the way you plan for and think about your own life and death?
Well, I've obviously planned for it. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Not being naive that I'm going to be on the planet forever and making sure that I'd say the biggest thing is I don't want anybody else to have to clean up anything that I have to do financially. And I don't want anybody to have to come out of pocket to fund anything that goes on with me.
You don't want to be a burden to anybody.
I don't, because death is hard on its own and you complicate it with all the other stuff that I had to go through. That sucks. And if you can just concentrate on going through your grief journey, even though it's tough, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do for my clients. I say, your job is to only work through your grief.
Your number one job is to grieve. That's what we say here.
That is correct. I got the finances. You're the captain of the ship. And you make all the decisions. I'm just on your side. I'm just your co-pilot.
I love that. And then there's an element of tomorrow's not guaranteed. And so how do you spend as much time as possible while your boys are home to be with them?
Sure.
And that's you working early in the mornings while they're at school and then late at night. so that you can make the most out of your time.
Sure. And at this point, too, I'll just be candid, doing this for 7 years and have done a lot of things the right way, has afforded me the flexibility to sometimes invade on that time during work where I can plan in stuff to do stuff with my family.
It's amazing.
And not miss a beat.
Yeah. How are you honoring, what are you doing today to honor your parents, your grandma, and your son?
I'm going to start from my son first. I'm honoring him by being the best version of a father and giving them what they need, and then giving them a huge leg up in life in the non-school stuff that they learn, the real life stuff, and having exposure to a lot of stuff, and allowing them to just be kids at the end of the day and not have to worry about all this other stuff that I had to worry about.
Just let them be kids.
Yeah, just letting them be kids. That's how I am honoring Christopher. I'm honoring my grandmother through the family that I have created along with my wife. And if she were to look at me today, she would say, yeah, you did it. You have a great family. My father, I'm honoring him because I'm doing business right and the right way. I am not practicing do as I say, not as I do. I'm doing and saying the same thing.
Love that.
And my mother, I'm honoring her. My mom was a huge health nut. And I'm honoring her by one, taking care of my mental aspect, and taking care of myself physically, because I want to live as long as possible with as little complication as possible. And so to take that a step further, my mother's cancer, it is my belief, didn't just pop up. And my belief, we don't have really cancer in our family, was a result of the traumatic pressure and stress that she went through her entire married life. And again, I'm no expert, but I've read enough and I've studied enough to know that it's going to come out somehow. And I believe that is the initial format that the stress and the pressure came out. And I don't want to have that happen to me.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm honoring my mom.
Yeah. I love that. I think you hit on a couple of my one specific saying and mantra that I have, which is your health is your number one asset, your physical health, your mental and spiritual health, which I know your mom was a big advocate of faith and going to church every Sunday, and your financial health, not just doing as I say, but as you say, but doing as you do.
Right.
I love that. Speaking of mantras, if someone were to come to you and maybe they're about the same age, or maybe it's 17 years ago, and they're going through the loss of both parents, a child, grandparent, and facing a traumatic upbringing, what words of wisdom or what mantras would you give them? What advice?
Mine is pretty simple. There is life after grief.
On brand.
On brand, yes. There's life after grief. And if I can expand that, with all the loss and all the heartache, you never forget, but you learn how to live life differently. And my life, learning how to live it differently is a beautiful thing. And I take pride and I take general excitement in this aspect of my life, and just enjoying life at this juncture. One of your podcasts too talked about some money habits of being very frugal with your money so you can get to retirement.
Yeah.
And although my upbringing taught me that I had to squeeze pennies at every point, life's not guaranteed. And I've seen that. And so I want to enjoy life today, not to where I'm going to go broke, but I want to enjoy it and see things and do things.
Yeah. Live it to its fullest.
Yes.
Amazing. Chris, thank you so much for your time and coming on the Currency of Grief podcast. As we wrap up, where could people find you?
They can find me on my personal website,
which I'll link in the show notes.
Yep, it's lifeaftergrieffp.com. And then consequently, I have a podcast. It's called Real Talk with Life After Grief, Chris. So I think if you put any of those two up, you can find me anywhere.
Amazing.
So
perfect. Well, I'll link both of those in the show notes for our audience. This conversation was incredible, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast to share your story, your lessons, and everything that you've been through. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. And
likewise.
Yeah. And I appreciate you, podcast family. I appreciate you for listening to Chris's story in this episode of The Currency of Grief. It's a great day to have a great day, so go have a great day. We'll see you next time.